Hello friends, welcome back to the James Lawrence Allcott channel. I'm wearing neutral colours because those sweet Gunners are heading off to the, what do we call it now, the Tottenham Stadium. Used to be White Hart Lane, Tottenham's ground, Spurs. Yeah, in a huge game. Absolutely massive North London derby, and the Arsenal title race starts right now because this is a match made for champions. So will Arsenal be able to blow Spurs away early? That's the big question in this one. I'll give you my prediction at the end of the video, but it's the North London derby at Tottenham where Arsenal haven't won in the league since 2014. Mikel Arteta started in midfield that day, but now he's in the dugout when Arsenal are in first place in the Premier League. This is, honestly, I don't think there's a game, and look, there's two huge derbies. I'm going to be doing a match reaction to the Manchester derby, of course, straight after the game, wherever I may be, and I'll obviously be watching that one. And I'm going to be on Twitch. If you want to check that out, link is in the description. I'm going to be watching the game on Twitch. Those highlights will then be on the YouTube channel, and of course I'll do a reaction as well, ready to go for YouTube. So every platform covered. But I've got to say, as a neutral, when it comes to the Premier League, there isn't much better than the North London derby over the last 5 or 6 years. I don't know if you disagree. If you do, let me know in the comments down below. But it's got that needle, more so, I think, than most games in the Premier League. So for Arsenal, even after 9 years without a win in this fixture at Tottenham, there's an expectation for Arsenal to get 3 points. But can they really take control away at Tottenham? Will Arsenal blow Spurs away in the first half? Let's have a look at the stats, because Arsenal are great. Spurs are rubbish in the first half. Arsenal in the first half, their stats 0.94 goals per first half and 6.88 shots. These stats, they tell us that Arsenal generally score in the first half of matches, and that comes as a big worry for Spurs, who rely on keeping it tight until the latter stages of a match. And in particular in the second half, we all know how poor and porous, actually, in the first half Spurs have been over the last 12, 13 games. And that's going to be a huge part of this because it will be electric. I think the crucial thing here is that the game is at Spurs, which will mean that you think there would be that extra level of energy from Spurs coming into this game. And so I don't think they will be blown away in that first half because it's at Tottenham Stadium. So let's talk about what is really at stake here, because this is the time now, right? You get past New Year's, and then you start to see these fixtures and you go, hang on a minute, they're not going to be playing those guys again. This is going to be absolutely huge. For Arsenal, this is the beginning of a crunch set of fixtures with Spurs, Man United and Man City all within the next 5 games. So does this feel like the start of a title race? I've got to be honest, I really think it's now. You know, the question's been there, like, are they title contenders? That's done, right? They are title contenders. And now, it's a long way in the distance, but we can see the finishing line. We really can. And these games are huge. You know, it's easy to say that the title race is well underway, but you know, when we do enter that new year, signings are made and competitors improve, which means that matches like this against your biggest rivals away, you know, against strong opposition, of course, as well, another team trying to get in the Champions League, a team that finished above you last year, it means a lot in the fight for the title. Another added element to this, of course, will be as it gets later and later, the pressure builds and builds, and we're far enough away from that. We're also far enough away from the Champions League games of February. So it's in that perfect little area where it's a huge game, but you should have a group of players that aren't completely blowing, basically, or, you know, in the midst of a chaotic run. And that's what makes this game perfectly poised at this moment in the season. For Spurs, there is a lot to correct for them. Their last home match was a 2-0 defeat to Aston Villa. They lost 3-1 to Arsenal earlier in the season, and they need to improve. They need to be able to hold their own against their rivals at home, because the fans who have been, you know, they found it a little bit repugnant, I think, some of the football over the last few weeks, because there's always been a feeling that, okay, Conte's there now. Oh, okay, I start to see it. We're starting to see the results. Surely the performances will come together and Spurs will come together. But it's another high-profile manager, and it's still a bit ugly, isn't it? You know, the last time Tottenham lost both home and away to Arsenal was also 9 years ago in that 2014 season. And they just can't face that kind of embarrassment again, especially as it's 3 more points to Arsenal, and to Arsenal, who are top of the league, and it gets them that step closer to the title. Spurs, the big thing here for Spurs is they can't let Arsenal dominate this game. It's in their backyard, you know. So how do they avoid that outcome? Well, looking at that 3-1 defeat earlier in the season in October, Conte set up with a 3-4-3, and this resulted in Spurs having 7 shots with 3 on target. But of those shots, they included a penalty, a cross from a set piece, and a counter-attack. They offered very little. That counter-attack was from an Arsenal corner that led to a header from Kane, but that header didn't really trouble Ramsdale's goal at all. So they really didn't create much in open play. The game plan for that one was to defend 5-4-1 with Richarlison and Son dropping deep, and they attempted to nullify Arsenal's attacking threat by overloading players in the box and in the final third. But this didn't work as intended, you know. They were too deep, way too deep for Arsenal's first goal when Partey scored. And to be fair, he did score an absolute cracker, which, I mean, he seems to have in his locker, but normally you could say the phrase of 9 times out of 10, that doesn't go in the top corner like it did. But the fact that he had the time to do that is the problem here. And Odegaard, he still found moments of space on the edge of the box. And this, once again, was due to the defensive positioning of Spurs. Plus, when they got on the ball, they just gifted the ball right back to Arsenal, and it allowed them to continue their domination of the match as they couldn't cope with Arsenal's press. Again, I've got to stress how important home advantage is in these games, because I think in terms of that tempo and almost the freezing of Tottenham, I think a big part to play in that was the atmosphere and the intensity of Arsenal's press. But bottom line is they really struggled. They didn't have options in midfield during the game, which was a surprise really when you got likes of Bentancur and Højbjerg, those players who should be offering up that outlet. And so there were these direct passes, as you can see here, that sort of went nowhere. So it's important to change the shape, you know, to avoid a repeat of that. Spurs have to set up in a way which allows them to gain more control and defend in better areas, which it can't be too hard to improve on because, you know, they were constantly retreating to their own box in that first game. I don't see that happening again. I think it's going to be a 3-5-2, which Conte has occasionally used throughout the season, and it could help to relieve pressure from those centre-backs. This changes how Spurs defend the flanks as the wide midfielder can press these areas as well as the wing-back. The advantage with this formation is that 2 midfielders are still in central areas, so there won't be as much open space on the edge of the box, which is where Partey scored in October. In possession, there is a slight disadvantage with this system because you're removing a winger, but with an extra player in the centre of the pitch to match what Arsenal have, I think this just means that they're going to be able to, you would hope, build a bit better in midfield, which was a huge problem for them. And although Arsenal will still want to press high, I can't see that being any different. Tottenham have to play from the back patiently, and the midfielders need to find those pockets of space in central areas, be brave, be confident, where they can then receive the ball and begin to play forward. I know that Conte likes to be direct and attack space behind quickly, and the centre-backs against Kane is going to be a huge part of this game. If you saw the Crystal Palace game, if you give Harry Kane an inch, he will do what he's done for a long time, and him and Son together will, again, you know, work well together. Son finally got a goal. He's been in poor form, but in particular Harry Kane, he looked absolutely fantastic in that game. He's been fantastic with set pieces, and when it comes to Arsenal, his record, as we know, is phenomenal. 14 goals against Arsenal. The only teams he scored more against are Everton with 15 and Leicester City with 20, and of course he scored earlier in the season as well. And so there's going to be a huge part to play here defensively from Arsenal's point of view on that left-hand side. I think firstly Harry Kane and those 2 centre-backs, but then, you know, Heung-min Son on that left-hand side looking to make those runs in between Saliba and Ben White. How they deal with that with Ben White, who's going to want to get forward and be positive, and he's going to try and sort of stifle those counter-attacks as well. If they are able to get the ball to Kane and he's able to find that space, they could be in trouble. Oh, it's certainly going to be difficult. Back to that midfield, and there's a massive question mark over Bentancur. I've read some bits, and my boy Flav says that Bentancur is apparently going to be fit and will start. But you never know, that might be mind games, and there is a decision to make here because, you know, you've got someone like Skip who you could stick with him, right? And he started against Crystal Palace, and he has been that kind of rotational player. But the 20-year-old Pape Matar Sarr, sorry, I'm struggling to speak here, he has impressed massively, and he's come from being the 5th choice midfielder, which I think he probably still is just about, to being at the forefront now, and he's featured in the last 3 games. I just wanted to sort of highlight it because I just wonder if it is mind games, and if it is mind games, then there might be a place for him. And remember, if it does happen, you heard it here first, okay, on the JLA channel. So Pape Matar Sarr, it feels like he is someone that's going to be used a lot more. Do you know what I mean? Because I think the thing that makes him a little bit different is that he's such a versatile midfielder who plays with confidence. And this might be the game for him. You know, maybe it's a bit too much, and maybe you're going to get that extra little 10% for someone like Skip. But he can play defensive midfield, but Bissouma is likely to play in that role in the midfield three. So instead, he can play as a wide midfielder to progress the ball with his dribbling ability, as he's really good technically. And it might be a risk to start Sarr, but Oliver Skip hasn't done too much to remain in the starting 11. And I think, again, Skip and Bissouma are kind of similar, or certainly they all want to kind of sit and protect maybe that little bit more. So maybe Sarr might be the sort of wild card in this game. So keep an eye out for that. Let's talk about Arsenal's attack, because what needs to be kept in mind is that Arsenal, they just drew 0-0 with Newcastle United, of course, which was the first league match that they failed to score in this season. However, throughout the season, they've managed to bounce back, and this result was due to a really, really strong and impressive Newcastle performance defensively. Arsenal are going to be encouraged, I think, overall by Eddie Nketiah, who scored in back-to-back games. Of course, didn't score in that 0-0 game against Newcastle, but I thought his hold-up play was pretty strong. He is very different. He's a little bit more linear, let's say, than Gabriel Jesus, who's going to go off to these different places and actually win the ball back in sort of transition backwards, actually, in defensive transition. He's been very, very good for that. You won't get that same amount from Nketiah, but overall, I've been impressed by his hold-up play, to be honest. What's going to be different here is that due to Spurs playing a 3 at the back, something that Nketiah has not come up against, and he's been able to just demonstrate exactly what Arteta wants to see in terms of taking the place of Jesus, in terms of being a hold-up man and not just a poacher. You can see it from his last 3 matches. If you have a look at his average positions here, you can see that he has been playing deep so that he can link up with the midfield and allow space for those fantastic wingers to make those runs in behind. This match is going to be a test, a huge test, because in terms of playing against that 3 and quite possibly a sort of central midfield 3 as well, it's going to be really, really congested. I think we all can agree that he doesn't have the technical ability of Gabriel Jesus. He's a different player. But he's proven that Arteta doesn't need to change his style too much. And if he can play to the levels that he did in the Newcastle game in terms of his hold-up play, I think Arteta and Arsenal will be in a good place. But the big question for me when it comes to Nketiah is, if that hold-up play, that link-up play, was that the best he can do and he's going to drop back to a sort of an average, or is that his standard? Let's talk about the best 11 then, because aside from Jesus, this is Arteta's favoured starting 11, and it's the best he could hope for going into one of these big matches. I mean, one of the biggest matches of the season, let's be honest. Odegaard has continued to prove how influential he can be to Arsenal, and people are beginning to say that he's up there with the likes of De Bruyne for his creative influence. I think the question mark is, and you look, when you're in a title race, these are usually the matches where you see those vital players step up and create a moment where you say one of those football cliches of, you know, that's what champions do. That's what teams that win the title do. And this is one of those games. And in particular, for the likes of, you know, Odegaard, Saka, Martinelli, players who I don't think have had that kind of burden put on them. And even in this season, haven't really had that burden because they've just been exceeding expectations. Despite their youth, they go into this game and this title running now, and it is the beginning of that, with that burden. And we're going to find out just how good they are. Aside from the obvious candidates, this could also be a match where the attributes of Zinchenko make a difference, and it'd be fitting seeing as he is currently a Premier League champion. Against Newcastle, he was great. You know, he made 17 passes into the final third, which is the most that he's made in a single game this season. He's able to cut through defences or play a quick pass in behind when the opposition have pushed forward, and this is how Arsenal can be super dangerous in this one. Right, prediction time. Here we go. Make sure you get yours in the comments down below. I think this will finish. So literally, this is where my head's gone. 1-1. Bosh. That was the first thing I thought. 1-1. And then I thought, Arsenal are better than Spurs. Spurs have a lot of players out. They're going to be looking to play on the counter-attack, but they have got home advantage, which I think is absolutely huge in this one. I think if this is played on a neutral ground, Arsenal win it. I think the fact that they're playing at Tottenham's ground makes it different. And so the sensible call is a 1-1. 1-1 is the sensible shout. But then there is always goals in these games. So the outrageous shout is 2-2. I would not be surprised if we saw a 2-2 here, especially with Kane on fire like he is. I think the team will really step up in a game of this magnitude. I do have a funny feeling that this will finish 2-1 to Arsenal, though. That's just what my gut's saying. I think they've got enough right now. I think the fluency is really there. And I think it's one where, even with these changes that we're putting forward, it's still one where that midfield have really got to step up for Tottenham. And I think you can't just click your fingers and do that. I think it's a very difficult moment for Tottenham. And I think Arsenal will... I think they might sneak it. I think they might pinch it. A little moment of Saka, Martinelli, Odegaard, one of those three maybe stepping up. Or Nketiah himself. It's a bit of a poacher. Gabriel from set pieces is pretty special as well. They've always had someone who's been able to step up generally. And I think they will. I think they'll do the double. I think they'll win 2-1. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this one, hit the like button, subscribe, and join me on Twitch if you feel like it. It's just going to be a casual one, but it's going to be one hell of a game. Thanks for watching. See you later.